Welcome to another episode of the Plutus Awards podcast. I'm your host, Chris Browning. Our community is filled with hundreds of stories from creators and entrepreneurs just like you. And through this podcast, we plan to share these stories from bloggers to podcasters, writers, speakers, and more. Let's meet today's guest.
Hi, my name is Maelisa Hall. I'm the co-host of My Biz Bestie. We've been podcasting for about 2 years. I do this because I really want to support other women business owners who feel lonely in having a business.
Hi, my name is Amber Hawley, and I'm the co-host of the My Biz Bestie podcast. We started our podcast 2 years ago. I do this because I could talk about business and marketing all day long, and being a therapist who is an entrepreneur, both me and my co-host felt like we wanted to address some of the emotional challenges and the isolation that a lot of business owners feel.
Maelisa and Amber, thanks for joining me. How are you two doing?
Good.
Good, thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was very excited to have the opportunity to talk to you two again. I've talked to you on Popcorn Finance, and I was like, I got to have you two on because you two are, I would say, experts, masters of networking and connecting with other people. You know, I met you two because Chick-fil-A brought us together one faithful day at a Chick-fil-A in a Dallas airport. I happened to meet Maelisa in line while we were trying to get some food on our way to FinCon. And I just was like, you know what? I'm supposed to talk to people. I'm at this conference. It's my very first time attending. I think it was your first time for both of you attending FinCon
Yes,
as well.
it was.
Yeah.
And we just started talking. And then Maelisa introduced me to you, Amber. And then it was just the rest was history. You guys brought me a pice of pecan pie from someplace in
The
Dallas.
best barbecue in Dallas, yes.
And our friendship was solidified. So I want to talk to you two because for me, that was extremely out of the ordinary. And for me, it was very difficult for me to approach people and attempt to build these relationships. I feel very awkward. I don't know what I'm doing at all. And it feels like it comes so naturally for the two of you. And so this episode, I wanted to talk about building relationships, networking, and how important that is to your business, to just your overall, I think, enjoyment of whatever it is you're pursuing, whether it's a podcast, a blog, you're making videos, whatever it may be. Networking, connecting with other people, and building true friendships, I think, is crucial to your success and the longevity of your success. So there's so many ways we can go with this. There's so many areas we could touch on. So I just want to know, first off, because since this is very awkward for me, how is it that you two became so comfortable at connecting with people, whether it be at conferences, whether it be through other circles that you have around in your area? What was it that pushed you towards that skill or that ability? Is it something that comes naturally to both of you? So Maelisa, how about you go first?
Yeah, I will be honest. There is a natural component, right? So do what you're good at. And it definitely comes naturally to both of us. But I will say I'm an extrovert. We're both extroverts. But just because you're an extrovert doesn't mean that you can't be shy. It doesn't mean that you can't feel awkward around people, right? So I know there are a lot of people who are extroverted and feel that way. And then there are a lot of people who are introverted and are really good at connecting with people. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't give you an excuse, right? To just feel like, well, I don't need to network with people. I have definitely gone through periods where when I was younger, I was a lot more shy. And part of it is just practice. For me, it's continually going out there. I think of even things like public speaking. I was terrified of public speaking when I went into college and was like nervous about doing, like one 5-minute presentation in front of 20 students. Before I graduated, I was speaking to the entire student body and I was on the student government and everything. And anyone who does something like speaking, they'll tell you that's just practice. The more you do it, the more you get comfortable, and it's something you have to do. And for some reason, I don't think we always see connecting with other people in that way. But it's the same thing. You have to practice how to connect with people, how to introduce yourself, how to carry on a conversation, how to get other people talking about themselves, how to, feel comfortable when you're doing that, how to know when you don't feel comfortable. So, there's a lot of, like you said, there's so many different ways we can go with it. But for me, there's a natural part of it, but then the other part is simply practicing and putting myself out there.
Amber, do you find that to be the same for you, that it took practice, or you just naturally just running up to strangers and talking to them?
Yeah, I think you think too much. Like, I think that the key to that ease is, I was like, oh, not swearing. Okay. The key is not thinking so much, but no, I absolutely do agree with her. I think, there are certain personality types. Those are those inherent traits that we have that lend itself, or it's just easier for some people to talk to people and not be in their head about it. I do think that that's something I've pretty much done all my life, being an extrovert. It's probably why I became a therapist, because people always talk to me. So I was like, I might as well get paid for this. So it's like my favorite things in the world, talking to people, and I get paid for it. I'm like, this is amazing. So I agree absolutely with Maelisa, but it is a skill that you can learn. And I think I still have those times where I'm like, oh gosh, I feel awkward, or like I'm not in the mood to talk to somebody, or I don't know anyone. And it's just that never feels like super comfortable, but I'm just willing to push myself because I know that the benefit of that, I know I have seen the benefit of meeting people and building relationships and networking, how it impacts both the opportunities I've been given in business, but also like my bottom line in my business.
Okay. I want to ask you too about how to get started if you're not comfortable with networking. But before we get there, because you brought up a good point, what are the benefits that you see in pursuing these relationships with other people? Whether you want to call it networking, whether you want to call it making friends, whatever way you see it, what benefits do you see in pushing yourself to be better at that and to make that a part of your routine?
Sure. So I'll start. Modern day networking, as I see it, is about building relationships. And I think the people who don't have a lot of success with it or struggle, it's because they're using it as like, hey, I'm going to this thing and now I'm going to sell you, hey, buy my package or whatever. And nobody likes that. So, and it doesn't work and it's not sustainable. So I really do think it is about relationship building. And that's what makes it more fun. So for me, immediately, I know that when I get to connect with other people and brainstorm and kind of, you start talking to people and realize like we all have a lot of, no matter what industry you're in, we have highs and lows in business, and we have a lot of the same struggles and challenges and also like the upsides, right? So being able to talk to like-minded people and kind of brainstorm that stuff, I think is huge. And then I think networking is a long game. So kind of like a podcast or a YouTube channel or something, I think it is a long game kind of play. And I have a few businesses and one is a brick and mortar. My brick and mortar business always has a wait list, and we always have more clients than we do even clinicians. 'Cause like I said, I'm a therapist. And I really credit all of the networking I've done with that, because people get to know you and they trust you and they like you, and then they send you business and they send you people, or you go to something and you're top of mind. So I really do see a direct connection long term. I see the direct connection with doing the networking and getting business.
Yeah. What about you, Maelisa? What do you see as the benefits of making this part of your life and being, improving yourself when it comes to networking and connecting with people?
Well, for me, honestly, part of it is that it makes everything more fun. I'm an extrovert and I do like being around people and having meetings like this throughout the day where we're like, right now, we can see each other on camera and we were chatting beforehand and we're having fun and connecting. And that brightens my day. Literally, I need that kind of interaction every single day with other people. And the more I do it, I leave the event or I leave the meeting, feeling more energized and feeling excited about what I'm doing. So that's part of it, is almost like a self-care practice, having fun. And it's okay to have fun at work or in whatever work you're doing or owning a business. The other part of it is touching on what Amber was saying. Part of connecting with people and networking is when you're doing it well, you absolutely will grow your business because you're making connections. You are ideally talking with people who would need to refer to you or want to refer to you. But a result of that too is that you get to help whomever it is that you're helping even more. Like I have an online business where I do continuing education for other therapists. A lot of what I do and a lot of my strategy is like content marketing, which is kind of like the introverted type stuff, like writing blog posts and SEO and all this stuff, right? But the other part of it is I collaborate with other people in the industry who are doing things I'm not doing. So we're not necessarily in direct competition with one another, although I do talk to people who are, but we'll do webinars together. And I've run a summit and had, 20 different people come on as guest experts and talk about all these different things. And so I'm providing a better service to my audience because I don't have all of that different expertise, right? So my audience gets more benefit. So all of your customers ideally also benefit from any networking that you're doing. And so you're able to provide a better service.
Oh, I didn't even think about it that way. That's true, because once you connect with, people multiple times, like as you build your network out, you do start to meet people who are complementary to what you're doing, or who are doing interesting things that you would have never even known about if you hadn't connected with them. So yeah, having the opportunity to connect with them and find these people you could work with really could be beneficial for you and whatever it is that you're trying to build.
Yeah. And like it's an added resource and benefit to your clients, because whether it's your clients or customers or whatever you call them, you have this wealth of knowledge that because you're out there meeting people and doing things, that sometimes you're able to solve problems for them and just be that resource. And again, it just makes you even more valuable both ways, to the people you're networking with, but also to your clients.
To touch on that point too, like Amber and I could just bounce off each other all day on this stuff, I think. But when you start meeting other people, and especially like we all met at FinCon, right? Amber and I are therapists who purposefully chose to go to FinCon to network outside of our industry. That was our purpose for going to FinCon. It wasn't like we were like wanting to do anything with finance necessarily. But the more you do things like that, then you build up this wealth of resources and other people start coming to you. And if you can be the person that people think of when they think, hey, I need this new resource, or I'm tackling this totally new thing and I have no idea how to do it, Chris probably knows somebody who can help me. I'm going to reach out to Chris. And if you can be that person that people are always connecting to, that gives you a ton of credibility, and it's just exponential how much your network starts to grow, but also how much value everyone is seeing that you're offering.
That is true. Yeah, because you start to, I guess like you said, you can become a resource as you begin to work with more and more people. Not only are they a resource for you, but you can become that resource for them. I know when I think of therapy, when I need someone who can talk about like an issue regarding therapy. Sorry, I have no better other example than that right now. You see me struggling.
I literally know nothing about issues.
It's called mental health.
There we go. That is a much better word. There we go. Thank you.
Depression, anxiety, like
a very happy
ADHD,
topic.
Anything.
But when I think of those topics that I can't figure out the words to use to describe them, I think of you two, because we met, we've talked, I trust you, and I feel like you are authorities on that topic. And it wouldn't have been possible without us having the opportunity to meet and us both actively looking to connect with other people.
Yeah, I think there's different roles. You can be that subject matter expert, or you can be the connector. And I think there's so much value in being the connector. And it might not be this direct, like, hey, I get like this kickback or 10% or whatever. Sometimes, yes, there's a deal in it. Sometimes there's an affiliate program in it for you. But sometimes it's just being that resource. And again, then people, you're top of mind, you're valuable to them, and then you get these other opportunities.
Yeah, and that is definitely something I learned from the two of you, is being a connector, because when we were at FinCon, that was what the two of you were doing like crazy. You were very good at talking to people, learning about these people, and then making those connections in your mind between, hey, I saw this person, and they were talking about complementary things, and making those introductions, which I think is something that I've tried to adopt now after seeing you do it and seeing how grateful I was for you to connect me to other people. I was like, oh, I would love to be that for someone else. So being that connector is also something that maybe I don't get anything out of it at all, but it just feels good.
Absolutely.
Knowing someone needs something, right?
Yeah. And I think you are great at that, obviously. Being somebody who, I think you can't say you're not good at connecting if you go somewhere, show up, have no plan, and then end up recording like 17 episodes with people you've never met. So I feel like you're doing something right there.
Well, thank you. It was because I had encouragement from people out there who were really good at it. And so I know there's people listening to this right now who are like, well, this all sounds great, but I'm terrified and I don't even know where to begin with any of this. So for someone who was like me at my very first FinCon, a lost soul walking around, not knowing anybody and afraid to kind of, hop in there and join in some conversations, what would be some advice you'd have for them? Like, how can they even begin to approach this situation and start connecting with people?
Well, can I actually flip that around on you and ask like what made you at FinCon, because we're talking about this and you're asking us like we're the experts, but you are the one who initiated all of us connecting because you were the one who asked me about my FinCon t-shirt that I was wearing, which was on purpose, everybody.
Good move.
Yeah. But you were like, hey, are you going to FinCon? Right. And so, it wasn't like, I don't think you sat there conjuring up that statement for an hour.
It was a good 6 minutes.
You don't know that.
Yeah, I was like, I think he spent a good 6 to 10 minutes thinking about, should I? No, that's creepy. No, should I? No, I'll just say something. Am I right?
That is actually that is a recording of what my mind was doing.
But what was it that prompted you to do that in the first place? And I'm guessing that it also had to do with the whole reason you were there, that this wasn't something you decided to do in line at Chick-fil-A.
It's true. I was like, I flew all the way out here. And what's the point of me paying money to come out here and taking time from work to do this if I'm not going to make some type of effort to meet people while I'm here? And so, yeah, I did sit there and agonize. You almost walked away. Like we were both in line. Like if your food would have came like 2 minutes earlier, I probably would have never said anything to you. But it took just long enough that it built up the courage to listen to me.
It's a good thing that half of our plane was in line at Chick-fil-A then.
Yes. Everyone rushed to Chick-fil-A when the plane got off.
And this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Chick-fil-A.
Bringing people together since, I don't know when they open, whatever. But yeah, for me, it was, I just felt I had to make the most of it, even though this is, talking to people I don't know was like super scary. I mean, it's gotten easier over time, but it was super scary to step out. And I was like, what if she was like, oh, look, who's this weirdo? No, I don't want to talk to you. I'm just trying to get this sandwich and get out of here. There's that fear and doubt you have in your mind.
Yeah.
I would say that is probably our number one thing that we talk to people about is have a strategy or a plan. And that's kind of what you had, right? That's what pushed you out of your comfort zone. Because to think that nobody has that thought, I have those thoughts too, where I'm like, oh, should I make that joke or not? Sometimes there is no thought and I just make the joke. but I think we overthink it. It's just about, sometimes we just have to put ourselves out there and just try it. But when you have a reason or a strategy or a plan, it makes it so much easier to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So for us, I know that we've gone in, not for FinCon, because we did have a couple, what we call our hit list. Like we were like, okay, these are a couple people we need to go see, or we want to meet, or we want to talk to in the VIP like speakers thing. So there were some people on our hit list for sure. And we usually do that, like have a hit list, but it's also about like, okay, it might just be somebody else that you've met before where you're like, okay, I'm going to follow back up. And because it is about building a relationship. So it does take time. And I think having some type of strategy or plan going into a conference or a networking event is the thing that will push you out of that comfort zone.
Yeah. And I think also not putting too much pressure on yourself. Your strategy can be just to make the introduction and have maybe one or two things that you plan to ask about. It doesn't have to be that you're going to make a best friend. So like you introduced yourself and we started chatting and we actually found out we were on the same flight and we both lived in Long Beach. And yet here we are meeting in the Dallas airport, and it's part of it is like, don't take it too seriously. It could have just been like, hey, that's awesome. And we could have parted ways. Right. But you still would have had a good, I think, like initial impression and like a good interaction and be like, okay, yeah, the next person I'm going to say hi to them too. So then taking it further for me is also like, if you connect with somebody, then keep talking to them, have dinner with them that evening. I knew I was going to be sitting there eating my food because I was going to be waiting for Amber. And although I didn't end up waiting for Amber, I ended up going to the hotel with you too. But I was like, hey, like we're both going to be eating lunch. Like you want to have lunch together? And then we ended up chatting for a while. Right. And then thankfully I felt a little bit safer because at that point I actually knew you and we were traveling on the little subway that's there. And you never know what a subway is going to be like in a city. Right. So I was like, okay, at least like I know this guy's here. Like this is kind of cool. So we end up talking on the way to the to FinCon and chatting more, but we were having a good time, like neither of us were putting pressure, like, oh my gosh, we have to keep this conversation going. And like, it was a genuine, like, no, I think we have a connection here and we're going to meet up again later.
That's true. Yeah, it was just natural, and that made me think of something that I learned from the two of you. I think we ended up meeting up at another conference, podcast movement in Philadelphia. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So we have something for the beginners to start with, and I want to look at something for people who, they're like, okay, I'm cool. I know how to introduce myself to someone. But there's some other strategies that you can, I think, use to make those conversations and interactions more pleasant. And one of the things that I learned from the two of you was, I feel like you had a name for this, but in general, the idea was, if you're meeting someone and say you're meeting someone and you love to work with them, maybe you want them as a guest on your show or whatever it may be, or maybe you want to just connect with them in some way, is to not make the ask the very first time you meet them. And I think it's very tempting to, when you see someone, maybe you have seen their work before and you're like, you admire them and you're like, I would love to work with them. I think there's a strong urge to just be like, hey, my name is Chris. I really want to have you on the show. Would you do it? You have this, you just want to just blurt it all out and just kind of let them know you want to work with them right away. But I think that can be off-putting for some people to have someone just ask right away the first time you interact with them.
Absolutely. Unless it's Oprah, she can do that to me. I'm cool with that. But as Maelisa was talking, that was going to be my follow-up, because I agree. I think that's where people make the misstep. And we've had it happen so many times where as soon as somebody finds out you have a podcast, they're like, oh, can I be on your podcast? Yeah. And Melissa's come up with a really clever response to that of, oh, you listen to the podcast? It's like, it's like a way of putting it back on them. But we liken networking to dating. Would you ever meet somebody for 5 seconds or 5 minutes and then say, hey, do you want to get married? No, or I mean, maybe there's a step before marriage, but I'm trying to keep this clean.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But you wouldn't do that, right? You would spend at least an hour together before you do that.
At least before getting married.
Yes. So it is about taking those baby steps, like you guys did, of meeting, having a, positive interaction. And then it's the logical next step ask, like, hey, do you want to sit and have a meal together, or coffee, or, a drink, whatever it is, you do that thing. And then you continue to build and see if there is more of a connection. And I do think, a lot of people talk about that, the concept, like I think about Gary Vee talks about like jab, 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 right hook. It's like give, then ask. Don't come in with the ask. That is so off-putting.
And I think it takes a lot of the pressure off too, when it's just, hey, I'm just going to make this introduction. I'm just going to, we call it touch points. Like, I'm just going to make a connection with someone. It doesn't mean that we have to sit and have a whole Chick-fil-A meal together, right? But it could be that, but there's no pressure for that. It's just a connection, and then I can move on. And then next time I see them, I'll make another connection. So read that, and, it gives you some flexibility in different circumstances too, but it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just be a hey, and then always thinking about how can I add value? How can I get to know this person? What is it that they're doing? Like, one of the best ways that you can make people feel good about being with you is to ask them about themselves. Ask them about what they do. Ask them about who are good referrals. Ask them about what they need help with. Ask them about things that they find interesting. Ask them about their family. All of those things. People just like knowing that you are genuinely interested in them.
The last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up the episode was, now we have some tips for people who are just getting started, who are super scared to reach out there and start some type of relationship or interaction with someone else they don't know. And then we have, for those of us who may be a little more comfortable, a little technique on how to respectfully approach someone and get the ball rolling and start those relationships out slowly. And then the last thing is, so now that you've gotten to the point, you've made some connections, you've met some people, you've built some friendships, and you've had, some continuous conversations going on. I think the last thing that I've learned personally from the two of you is the value of a mastermind group. When I first went to FinCon, I met you two. I had no idea what that was. I never even heard that before. It sounded like some type of scam. Like, I don't know, like it was going to be like some like multi-level marketing thing. Like, what do you mean a mastermind? What are you talking about? What is this? But after talking to you some more, and you sitting over some podcasts for me to listen to, I think it was Biz Chicks podcast, where they went really in depth on masterminds, and there's like multiple episodes on it. I really started to understand what it was and how this could be a very valuable tool to really connect and go deeper and really have the opportunity to learn from these people, because you're not going to go have lunch with someone and just say, teach me everything you know. That's probably not the place to get all their knowledge out, is right there. Maybe they just want to have a meal and talk to you. So I found that masterminds was a great way to really learn from other people who are doing things that are similar to you, maybe things that are different from you. And so for you two, maybe I'll have you describe what is a mastermind now that I've just thrown that word out like 8 times now. And then also, what is the value that you two see in masterminds, and why is it something that anyone even consider?
A mastermind is, I guess the way that we think about it is, it's a small group of people that get together and you're talking about business issues that are coming up for you, kind of problem solving and setting goals. Masterminds can be paid, where you have a paid facilitator who organizes this, or they can just be peer-led masterminds where it's, everybody's making a commitment to show up. And I think there's criteria that make a mastermind successful. And obviously you could probably link some of those podcast episodes where people talk about that. Some people, that's their business model and they're really great at masterminds. And we actually did a couple of episodes, I believe, about masterminds and kind of like how to structure a peer-led one as well. But basically that's the gist of it, is a coming together of a set group of people for a set period of time and making a commitment to kind of show up and give each other support in business and giving feedback to one another.
And Maelisa, what value do you see in that? Or what have you gotten from that personally, is participating in mastermind groups?
One of the biggest benefits is that however you structure the group, there are different strategies behind that, but you want it to be people who have different skills or different backgrounds and opinions, different strengths, or even totally different businesses, so that you're getting some diversity. Because we all know, regardless of whatever it is that you start, it's very difficult to actually evaluate yourself and to look at your business or your project with an objective viewpoint. So you want to surround yourself with people who are open to giving you feedback and people that you respect to get that feedback from. So people whose opinion you'll respect. Usually, for me, the benefit has been, it's not like I got some earth-shattering or like super awe-inspiring information or like someone gave me some epic strategy. It's usually people telling you things you already know or reminding you about things that maybe you were doing in the past that you let go of, or reminding you that you're off track on something and helping you get back on track. So it's often like little shifts or ways of helping you adjust what you're doing, but it's because there's a relationship there. So it's because these people know you, they know your business, they know your why, they know your mission. So they're making sure that you stay on track with that, but they're more objective about seeing how that's happening.
Mm.
And sometimes I do think you get a really good strategy or like an aha, or sometimes it's getting resources from people, but I think helping you with mindset or doing what I would call a carefrontation, where you're lovingly challenging somebody like, girl, you're not doing what you said you were going to do. What's going on? That kind of thing. And you can take that in, I think, a lot better because that is somebody that you have this trust and relationship with. And like Maelisa said, I think the diversity is so important because you're getting people who have different, strengths in business or different skill sets. And what's easy for one person could be a real struggle for someone else. So I think it's a really cool collaborative kind of problem solving. But I do think the one important thing about masterminds is, and this is why you network, and this is why you do want to meet lots of people, is you want somebody who's at the same pace and same kind of level of business. I would say pace is probably the better word for it. Like, you don't want somebody who's in their first year of business who's just starting out. They could be brilliant, but they're having challenges unique to that business that are very different than somebody who's scaling their business, or somebody who's really getting into growth mode and has employees and all this other stuff. There's just different challenges. And I think being at the same kind of stage of business and pace is really important.
No, that's a lot of great information to think about there too, because you are getting into a semi-long-term relationship with a group of people. So I think it is great to have that prior experience with them to know if it'll be a good fit and if it'll work out, because I think you all get the most value from it if you understand what you're all getting into and understand who it is you're going to be working with.
Oh, for sure. And we can really speak to that because in this last year, that's something we were really thoughtful about. Like, okay, we want to create a peer-led mastermind where we really try to be selective about who we're choosing to be in, not to be mean, but to be like, okay, does this seem like it's a good fit? And does it seem like they have a complementary skill set and they're in the same level of business? And I think vetting is really important. And that is the value of paying somebody for a mastermind too, because that facilitator should be the person who is selecting and choosing those people to make sure that it is a good sampling and everybody's at the same level.
Yeah, well, no, thank you. I think this is a lot of great information for people to work off of here as far as whether you're just starting out and you need some help making that first contact with someone, or if you've been doing this for a while now and you want to, understand how to further those relationships and really, I think, provide value to each other. So thank you so much, Maelisa and Amber, for joining me and spending some time talking about, I think, an area that you two are experts in my mind. And so I think people should definitely go check out My Biz Bestie podcast. You cover this topic, not every day. That's not what your show is about. But I think there are some really good episodes in there that cover this topic. If there's something that people want to know more about, if they want to reach out to you, or if there's like maybe something specific about your show you want to recommend to people, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Actually, we just did an episode about networking and about how to make it less awkward. That's something that we talk about in those episodes. And like you said, we've done a few episodes about networking and the different challenges, or like how not to be douchey at networking. Like we've done that episode too. So feel free to listen to that one and make sure you don't do any of those things. But yeah, head on over to mybizbestie.com and check it out, or you can listen to our podcast on any place podcasts are played.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate all of you joining us here for another episode, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Maelisa and Amber as much as I did. Next week's episode will be a great one for those of you looking to learn a little bit more about starting your very own podcast. I know I've worked on a couple of podcasts at this point, and in the beginning, it was one of the scariest things I've ever done. There's a ton of questions. I always felt like there was more I needed to know and I wasn't prepared. And one of the people that I turned to get advice on starting my podcast was next week's guest, Steve Stewart. Steve's name might sound familiar to you because it's one of those names that gets thrown out there every time you ask, who should I talk to if I want to start a podcast? And it's because he's been doing this for many years, edits a ton of the biggest podcasts in our community, and is a huge source of knowledge in this community. So I'm really excited to have him on to share some of his tips on not only how to start your podcast, but how to make it one that you'll be proud of. So make sure you're subscribed so that way you can get that episode and more from the Plutus Awards podcast. You can learn more about our guests and the Plutus Awards podcast at plutusawards.com/podcast and on Instagram at Plutus Awards. Again, thanks so much for joining us, and remember to keep creating.